with Dr. Leslie Pendleton. My name is Paul Ortiz with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. We're also joined by Daniel Hernandez and Adolfo Romero. It is December 15, 2020, and we're going to be talking to Dr. Pendleton about a project that is near and dear to her heart, the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program. She is the director of that program. Leslie, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today.
Of course.
Well, I wonder if we could start, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of your own educational, background and something about your pathway to higher education.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity and for really being interested in the Machen Florida Opportunity Scholars Program. I think it's definitely something special here at the University of Florida. So for me, I grew up in the Midwest, went off to college at the College of Worcester. So undergrad, small liberal arts university, slightly southeast of Cleveland. And I was an athlete. I was a swimmer in college, political science major, pretty involved in like student, leadership and organization opportunities. And then I worked for a year after I finished my bachelor's degree at a gifted and talented residential public high school in Indiana. And wanted a break kind of from school, but knew I would probably always venture back to some sort of higher education. Both of my parents are faculty members, actually, so I don't identify as a first generation college student. Happy to talk a little more about that in a minute. But I earned my master's degree at Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, in higher education and student affairs work. And at that juncture, really kind of became, I think, pretty aware of the first generation college student experience. Interestingly, my graduate assistantship was in our Office of Admissions. And I helped not only review prospective, applications by interacting with students and families. And I did the whole, welcome to Miami. Probably your friends think that, they're jealous of our palm trees, but in fact, we're actually in Ohio. So interested to get to know you and your family and talk to you about all that Miami University has to offer. And kind of simultaneously, I was working on a project for one of my classes about the first generation college student trajectory and journey, and realized, kind of had this moment of cognitive dissonance. And I was like, I'm learning about all of this in my coursework, but I'm also talking to prospective students and families and not even realizing that those in the audience likely are first generation college students. And so again, this moment of needing to, I think, personalize and tailor the experience to students and families, but also recognize kind of, again, some of the inequities of students and families and realizing that, everybody's college experience wasn't necessarily like my own, having two parents with PhDs. So that was an interesting kind of moment in my my learning. And when I was at Miami of Ohio in my master's, we all were required to do a summer internship, ideally at an institution that we had never been affiliated with, to learn more about, again, higher education more broadly. And so I worked at the Ohio State University in first undergraduate admissions and first year experience. And so I worked with orientation and got a real feel for a larger school environment and really liked it. And so when I finished my master's degree, fast forward another year, I was looking to work ideally at a larger land grant institution and landed here at the University of Florida, working in new student and family programs. And so helped run our orientation and first year experience programs from 2006 to 2009. And so 2006, for those of you learning about this program, might sound like an important date. That was when the then Florida Opportunity Scholars Program launched. And I vividly remember we were sitting around the conference room table in Peabody Hall, because I was a member of the Dean of Students staff, and Jean Jarsky, our Dean of Students at the time, said, so we have this new scholarship program that President Machen wants to launch, and Dr. Tejas Irvin is very supportive of it, but we need a team of people. Has anybody ever worked with first generation college students before or really know anything about the first gen experience? And eager, brand new professional, having really loved learning about the first gen college student journey and doing a little research on my own at Miami of Ohio, raised my hand and said, oh yeah, actually, I'm pretty familiar with first gen students from, my coursework. I was such an expert at that time as a new professional. And so he was like, great, you can be on the committee. And so I represented the Dean of Students office on our founding kind of committee that at the time, Karen Folks, who was the director of Student Financial Affairs, which was in Student Affairs, she led the task force committee, I think it was MFOS committee, well, FOS committee of folks. And that included some people who are still here, Ron Anderson, Kathy Rex, Dana Peterson, you might remember, who used to work with the then AIM program. Anyways, a group of about 7 of us came together and met pretty regularly to build out the support elements for this program. And so I was part of the program from the beginning, but then in 2009 became the director. So I answered more than you asked in your question, but hopefully that gives you a good sense of then to now a little bit.
Oh, that's great. Well, I was, wondering, Dr. Pendleton, considering that both of your parents, have PhDs, what did education mean to you growing up? Like, was there a point where you realized your parents had, certain expectations for you?
That's a good question. I don't know expectations necessarily, other than it was more probably ingrained in me that education was valuable and important. My mom actually earned her PhD when I was 10. So I do kind of remember kind of the night classes and her staying late to work on her dissertation. And so again, observing that, I was still young, obviously, but I remember staying late at Latchkey or at the babysitter's so that she could stay and, finish and earn her degree. So I think it was, something for me that it wasn't necessarily pressure expectations they put on, but I knew that it was a possibility. And I knew that it, their jobs and whatnot provided stability for us. And so it wasn't an expectation and pressure, but it was more so, I think, an option and a good path should I decide to pursue that. So I didn't talk about the PhD yet, but I did earn that also as a mom myself. And so I earned it in 2016 here at UF. I did it part-time through the EEP program while I was a full-time employee at UF, and finished in 2016. At that time, my kids were like 9 months and how old was she? 3, I think. So they were little as well.
Wow. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
It's incredible. One of the things, I may have some questions to you about your degree work a bit later, but I wonder if you could take us back to when you first arrived at the University of Florida, and several of the key people behind the Opportunity Scholars Program have talked with us about having to overcome the existing climate at the time at UF, which is much more geared towards, kind of the traditional student, say second, third, or even fourth or fifth generation college student. Take us back to when you first arrived here, what your initial impressions were of the climate of the University of Florida, and maybe some of the challenges that, say, non-traditional students had to face, arriving in Gainesville.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the university, from a historical perspective, and this isn't just unique to UF, but a lot of institutions really were built and set on a foundation that maybe is not as equitable now as it may have been then. And so I think, our students that we've served always through this program have always had the grit, the determination, the resilience, the educational credentials in order to be successful here. But I think, a product of our size in many cases, or I don't know, just kind of feeling lost in the shuffle. I think there wasn't as much intentional outreach to demonstrate, care and interest. And it doesn't mean we weren't caring then, but it just wasn't part of our kind of culture fabric structure to be as intentional, I think, about outreach. And so I think this program was maybe one of the first of its kind, not the only, but one of the first of its kind, I think, to say, we as an institution want to do better. We want to reach out to students. We want to get to know them. We want to learn about what their educational opportunities are, and then connect them to the correct people and resources to help them be successful beyond just access. One of the things you might hear me say, or may have already heard me say before, is the scholarship opportunity, and UF at the very foundational pieces of this program, I think, really wanted to provide access and scholarship dollars to be a student at UF to fulfill this land grant mission. And that is great. That is far better than what some of other institutions are able to do. However, access and scholarship without the support mechanisms and the infrastructure and the people to really I think, invest in the individuals that are beneficiaries of the scholarship, I think that's almost an empty promise. And so I think one of the things that UF did really well from the beginning is realize it's more than just the scholarship. The scholarship is a huge support and incredible piece in order to remove that financial barrier. But if we don't have the people in place and the peer mentoring and the financial literacy and all these other, intentional outreach and support elements, the return on investment, frankly, of this program in the form of the scholarship is not going to be as great as it can be. And so I think the climate at the time, I think this place has always been very, very seemingly relational and open and genuine people who care, but I just don't think the infrastructure was there to do some of the things we've now been able to build out because of the program. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I wonder, kind of dovetailing with that, Leslie, if you could take us, you mentioned the meetings, these very important early meetings. Take us back to, if you could, those early discussions, and, if you could kind of tell me, like who was setting the agenda, like what were some of the topics, like what were you trying to do at the time?
Yeah, so Karen Folks, then Director of Financial Affairs, she was the one who would set the agenda and bring kind of the updates. Everything from, she and Dr. she reported directly to Dr. Tejas Urban, who was the then Vice President of Student Affairs. And so the two of them were, I think, from what I understand, the kind of movers and shakers behind setting the parameters, setting the initial, or the selection criteria for who the students were going to be. This committee that I talked about that I was a part of was really more so in place to build out the support elements. So the financial aid office has always been tasked with identifying the scholars, selecting them, making sure their financial aid package is intact. And then that committee, and then ultimately transitioning to me in 2009, we were responsible for the support pieces. So for my other duty as assigned as a member of that committee, I built the peer mentoring program. That was like my task the first couple of years of that program. Does that help kind of? So we'd sit around and we'd say, okay, like what are the things that these students need to be communicated? Who's going to do the outreach? Who's their point of contact? What are all the things we want to suggest they do? The very first year, the 2006 cohort, they didn't have any requirements because we weren't really sure what we were doing. It was almost like we were flying a plane as it was taking off. And then the second year, once we had 1 year worth of data to show that, taking first year Florida, having a peer mentor really showed that helped you be more successful. So then we had 1 year under our belt and we said, okay, now second cohort of the program, these are your 4 requirements, on top of continuing to earn your degree, like continuing to earn credits and, making sure your GPA was in good shape. You also needed to, have a track record of meeting with your mentor. You needed to take and pass first year. The first year we said, just take first year Florida. And then we realized some people failed it. And so we said, oh, well, now we should revisit that and say, we need you to take it, but we need you to earn it with a C or better. So those were the kinds of things that we would discuss and talk about in those meetings. The community building activities where we would go to the president's house to do a welcome reception. We would plan some of that. We would say, who are the other campus supporters or VIP people who should be invited? How do we, start to talk about this program? Should we do a press release? All of those kinds of things are what this committee did. And remember, it was nobody's full-time job. We all were participating on this committee as kind of an other duty as assigned. And then by year 3 in 2009, we said we have 3 cohorts of these students. Now we were at about roughly 900 or so students in the program. And, we made the case and said, look, so far this program is going really well, but nobody is dedicated to be leading the program and leading the show. And so at that point is when we made the case and Dr. Tejas Urban agreed. And that's when I transitioned to become the director. Excellent.
Well, you're going to love the next set of questions because these are kind of, administrator to administrator questions. I'm fascinated by how you were able to fine tune and improve the program from year 1 to year 2, and then year 2 to year 3. You didn't have a dedicated staff person yet. Is that correct?
Correct.
So institutionally speaking, considering that a university is like a big oil tanker in the middle of the ocean, right? It takes 20 miles to turn around or whatever. Institutionally speaking, how are you able to make those changes from year 1 to year 2 to year 3? And if you wouldn't mind kind of walking us through the most important changes for student success?
So I definitely have to say that we were able to do it because we had, the president of the university's blessing and backing, and he was very involved from the beginning. So Dr. Machen is clearly, owed a lot of credit for believing and investing in this program. And at the same time, I think also trusting those of us who worked in student success and on that committee, and Karen Folks as well, and her expertise in the financial aid world. I mean, he definitely believed strongly in the program, but he also trusted those of us who do this work all the time to figure it out, if that makes sense. And I think Dr. Tejas Irvin as well, right, as the vice president for student affairs, the fact that this was a program that was invested in from the beginning, I really believe in grassroots efforts, and, everybody plays a role in kind of developing new techniques and programs and whatnot. But if you don't have the buy-in from the top, sometimes things are going to kind of limp along often. And so the fact that we had investment and buy-in from the top, I think really mattered. Now, as far as the things that we tweaked and changed along the way, I'm going to have to go way back. I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but we definitely ran into a little bit of, I don't know if resistance is the right word, or I think colleagues who carefully questioned a couple of things that maybe made us rethink or help us frame the narrative in a way that was very positive and asset-based when we talk about first-gen students. And one example of that is we had, again, a very well-intentioned person, I have to believe, say, I'm not really sure that students are going to want to be affiliated with this program. If you kind of wear a t-shirt that says, I'm a Florida Opportunity Scholar, isn't that basically just saying I'm from a poor, uneducated family? Who's going to want to be super excited and associated with your program? And so I think that, at first, I think we were a little bit but that was true. That was a good thing for us to consider as a group. And it was very intentional that scholars was a part of this program, and using the word scholar, because, all of our students, as I said before, are scholars. They were all admitted on their own merit at UF. They're incredibly bright and incredibly gifted. And it was important for us to really own that as part of the narrative. And when we had our very first kind of event at the University House, now it was called the President's House then. In fact, Bernie lived there at that time. We had that first event there, and we were really, intentional and saying, you all are scholars, you're brilliant, you're smart, we're a better place because you're here, and really talked about them as a really value add to the university. And I think that, again, set the stage for, I think, others at the university to understand that first-gen students, it's not just this deficit-based perspective or, oh, woe is me, or, I do come from a poor, uneducated family. That's true, but that actually gives me a leg up in many ways because I'm grateful for opportunities. I work hard, I'm resilient. Again, all of these positive contextual pieces that I think helped reframe some of those colleagues who questioned, if that makes sense. So I think year over year, that became a stronger part of our narrative and something we've never gotten away from.
Very cool. Well, and that's a really critical part of the narrative now, Leslie. I think it's easy for us to take it for granted because now we just, in a sense, you've won the war of words in a sense, because now it's common to hear people, because of the success of the program, to say that first generation students make the University of Florida better. Mm-hmm. However, as you know, that wasn't always the case. Mm-hmm. And could you talk a little more about how you kind of were able to make that point to colleagues and administrators and other students who may have had look at us, look at how charitable we are for helping these poor kids up, Yeah. And as you know, that's a common attitude, unfortunately, in higher ed oftentimes. So how did you kind of prove this, that, we're actually improving the university? This is not like for special kids program or something like that.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I hear Dr. Machen say that all the time. This is a special program, but it's because you're special people. It's not because, it's not about us. It's about you all. And our real intrinsic, hope and drive and support to really, care about these students. But we're not there taking the physics exams and passing these courses. That's what you're doing. So I don't know. I think that honestly maybe is just, a strength of mine in many ways. And it's not all about just me. I mean, I think this group who started meeting early on to have some of the, like, wrestle with some of these issues and questions was really pivotal. It also, first generation students, while they've been around forever, it was really the early 2000s, I think, in our country where, as an institution, not just at UF, but I think in other places, we started to talk more about first generation students. And so I don't know if it was like a blank slate in many ways, but I do think we had the opportunity to frame the narrative at the right time. And because we went that direction, I think it set the stage for the next 15 years and hopefully really forever. And so other institutions have kind of followed suit, I would say. And there's now a 3-year-old center at NASPA, which is one of our higher education, like, national organizations. There's a Center for First Generation Student Success now, and it's only 3 years old. And I'm one of the 20 or so advocacy members, which are, administrators from across the country who help guide and lead that center into existence. And, in some ways, it's, I think, a real testament to UF to say, well, it's great and all that we're doing this now on a national scale, but we've been doing this since 2006. And there's a few other institutions, I can't take full credit at UF, but like the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill has the Carolina Scholars Program. Our program was loosely modeled after kind of their efforts, but really Carolina and then Florida, from all of my looking around and research, I mean, we're really the two kind of originators of a lot of this work. And so because we had a clean slate and we had some tough, closed door conversations where we really wrestled with some of this narrative, and we saw it as an opportunity to, I think, really make an impact, like, currently, but then also think about what we want at UF more, like, strategically for the long run.
Yeah, it is a long run struggle, is it not? And some of the reading that we're looking at in the spring internship, we're talking about, or we're kind of looking into this cycle, this ebb and flow, this concern over education and equity, because, up to World War II, it was assumed that higher ed was really for the kids of elites, especially in the South. And then you have the GI Bill of Rights, and that changes everything. But again, if you could go back to 1945, there were all these debates among faculty administrators, like, a lot of them didn't want that program because they're like, we're not set up to work with these people, who just won World War II, by the way, but that's another story. But higher ed was not really designed, even the land grants, to work with such a broad constituency. So this is a challenge.
Well, and then you have the, self-pay, like, who should pay for higher education? Is it the individual? Is it the state? Is it the institution? And I think that's another layer here, in that there is, a real debt adverse population out there because, families who are lower income have had a variety of, relationship moments, I would say, with money. And I think there's a real aversion to taking on debt, and, that the way to pursue, higher education in many ways in our country has always been, well, sure, you just take federal loans or you borrow money for the experience. And a lot of the students, tell us anecdotally, but then this is also in the literature as well, is if there wasn't a program like this that could help pay for my school, I wouldn't be in college, or I wouldn't be at UF. I would have taken a cheaper option, or I would have started working. And I think, again, the equity around, income and whose family can afford to be a full pay or a partial pay student at a university, there's still a huge wealth gap. And so, again, that access, removing of the access is definitely step one. And I think that is, the coupling of the removal of the access of money, but then also the support structures and the positive kind of asset-based approach to what this program has done. It really is the collision of both the financial and then, like, everything else to help you be successful in college.
Yeah. Melissa, I wonder if you could take us back to your first day on the job, like when you transitioned from being, one of the kind of the originators and doers, movers and shakers, but now you're a staff person. You tell us what your initial job title was, where your office was, and like what was your first week of work like?
Yeah, that's great. Let me think about all the details. Well, first of all, my title was director of the Florida Opportunity Scholars Program. And that was in 2009. So Dr. Teas Irvin was still our vice president, and she, again, gets credit for helping build the program from the beginning. And I really wish she were still alive in order to do an interview like this, because she would have loved it. But she was very intentional, in my opinion, about, she said to me, like, I'm going to hire you as the director, but I want you to move into my suite at Tigert Hall. And I was like, oh, Tigert. Okay. Well, what I hear from students is that's kind of, the main administration building, almost kind of the president's office, or the president's office was there, but the principal's office, if you will. And so she said, it's always bugged me kind of that here in the main administration building, we don't really have a lot of students that come through here. And it's important to me, Leslie, that you're here so that the students can come meet with you here in our space, so they can see that Tigert and the administration is, cares about them and is more welcoming than maybe they think initially. And the other thing that was really crucial is she said, I want other administrators in the building to see the Florida Opportunity Scholars program on our nameplate outside of our suite, because I want them to see that this is a priority and it belongs here kind of front and center in a physical location that others will see it. And so I was like, okay, sure. Tell me what to do. When do I start? Where's my office? Right. And so we stayed there for the next 10 years. We were in Tigert Hall, and really was the only front facing student program that would bring students into Tigert. And so, yeah, we were there. I'm trying to think of the first week. I mean, the nice thing was I had worked in orientation and new student and family programs, and working in that, on that team, I had a lot of contacts all across campus, from academic advisors to, Ron Anderson at the ombuds. I already knew a lot of people, so I didn't have to.
Excuse me for a second, Liz. Can you tell us what time of the year? So you started right at the beginning of the academic semester?
I think so.
Okay, so wow, so that's perfect timing in a way.
Yeah, August of 2009.
Okay, excellent. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. And I actually do remember, so again, nobody had been the director, but all of us were associated with the program. And so the scholars knew us, by and large. So they already kind of knew who we were. But of course, an email went out saying, Leslie's going to now become the director of the program, and all of that. And so students started, finding me. But the council, or the committee, the support committee I've told you about, we remained intact, because while it was great that finally we had one person to kind of lead this program, I still needed a good broad base of support from across campus. So we kept meeting. I think we moved it eventually to monthly. We would meet as a group to continue to build infrastructure. And they really helped say, okay, what are the pieces that Leslie, as a full-time person now should really focus on to help to elevate the program.
Excellent. Now, Bernie Machen and Dave Kratzer, and I think just about everyone we've interviewed, has talked about this special event where the first year students meet at the president's office. Can you tell me how that started, and why you felt that was important in the beginning?
Yeah, I guess Bernie started it. He wanted to host this welcome event and reception, again, at the University House, for all of the new students. We also, from the beginning, had peer mentors, I think you heard me say earlier. And so it wavered between 40 and 60 peer mentors. They were older scholars in the program. The first couple of years, they were older student leaders, because, the juniors were not part of the program yet, but they helped us in mentoring capacity. So they were invited to this new scholar reception as well. And then again, I think at Bernie and Dr. Teas Irvin, Dr. Machen and Dr. Teas Irvin's leadership, they brought in a bunch of deans and campus VIPs and other kind of notable leaders on campus to attend this as well, which again, I think was strategic to really build this. This is a program we care about, not only strategic from the students, the new scholars seeing all these grown-ups, right, who are here to support them, but for the grown-ups to see that, this is a really talented pool of first-generation students, and we need to be celebrating them. Again, from this asset perspective and not deficit perspective. And so it I think, served this multi-purpose. So I can't take credit for that being my brainchild, but that was something that started the very first year, and something we continue to do to this day, that the new scholars, their peer mentors, and then campus VIPs get invited to this event. And then in more recent years, I guess the last 8 or 10 years, we've also invited local donors to that event as well. To also come and again showcase kind of the new scholars to the program as well.
Mm-hmm. In those early years, Leslie, I know we could talk about this topic for hours and hours, but who are some of your favorite students memories of students in those early years that you were like, wow, this is really incredible?
We could talk about this for a while. I'll tell you one story. So again, pretty brand new professional at this point, right out of my master's degree. And I taught first year Florida, an MFOS section. So we always offered 3 or 4 MFOS sections so that our scholars we could essentially fill the demand of all of our scholars needing to take that class. So I taught a section, and I had a student come up to me after a class one day, and she said, so I know we have some evening commitments. Would it be okay if I brought my 16-month-old to this event? She's really well behaved. And again, brand new professional. I was like, and my schooling and my experience had all been very traditional. And so, I had never until that moment thought that, oh, wow, we could very well have students in this program or just at UF in general who have, dependent children or family members they're caring for. And so I was a little shaken for a minute, but I said, of course, yes, we can definitely make, those arrangements, not a problem. Well, she became one of my mentees for a long time. And I, at first had this, again, I think natural, I'll own it, sort of deficit reaction. I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to struggle. Like, how's she going to do this? How can she be a parent and do school? And I learned so much from her. She put me in my place. She graduated in 3 years. She is a licensed speech pathologist in Belle Glade, Pahokee now. She and I stay in touch. She's since married and has 2 or 3 other children. And I mean, she's awesome. And I'll just never forget, her helping me understand kind of the complexities of all students' lives, but in particular, a lot of the students, that our program serves. And so she's one. I have lots of stories like that. I do have some stories of students who said, I don't really want to formally be associated with this program because of the stigma. And that has not happened in recent years. That was more kind of in those earlier years. I had some students who, why do I have to do all these extra requirements? This isn't fair. But then once we really started seeing kind of the success and whatnot, I think most people really have come around. But that's one example of an early story. No, I have a lot, but that's one.
Are there other former students that you still keep in contact with?
Yeah. You know this, Paul, you're in touch with a ton of former students too.
I know, but I have to ask you the question. We have to pretend that we have no knowledge of.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No, for sure. I mean, we have some shared students. That's not what I was talking about, but I just think in general, being able to be a listening ear for a student or help point them in the right direction, or frankly, just do my job with, I think some really genuine authenticity. You have students who connect to you in ways that are really powerful when they're here, but then they stay in touch. And ones I will, this happens all the time. I'll be looking through some old file or something in my office. I'm like, oh my gosh, whatever happened to that student? I haven't heard from them in 3 years. Let me see if I can find them on LinkedIn, and then reach out and we do a, check-in appointment, or we meet again and reconnect. And so that's really fun. And I think as my career, has evolved and I finished the PhD and my job has kind of slightly changed in the recent years, the now alumni are the students that I stay most closely connected to. Richard and Erica, our assistant directors, do a lot of the day-to-day one-on-one student work that I was doing by myself for so long. But our oldest scholar, or our oldest alumni right now, is 34, 35. So they're all still fairly early in their careers. Many are starting families or, moving, settling down. And so it's been fun for me to kind of watch their postgraduate journeys.
Excellent. Well, I've one more question, and then I think Adolfo and Daniel probably want to ask some questions as well.
Sure.
But I was wondering, you've given us a really good overview of your kind of initial job description and how it evolves over time. But as we all know, there's the job description, there's what may be down on paper, the expectations and day-to-day work. But what have been some of the things that you've done as a director of MFOS that you couldn't find in a job description, that the things maybe that are unspoken or things you've just had to kind of step up and do because of the special nature of the work?
I think, the answer to that question is I think there's, the individual student support, case management. You kind of just do what you need to do. I need to buy a student lunch. I'll figure out how to do that. There's those sorts of things. But then I think on more of a larger scale level, I mean, I think being an advocate for first generation students and equity and students of color, you know, at a university like UF is something that is I guess, an unspoken element of my job description. I've served on a lot of different task force and committees, and, you know, always ask, well, have we consulted students about that, or what is their feeling, or, you know, just kind of being a student advocate on a different level, in a way to help, I think, our university move forward. A lot of our work too ties into, we haven't talked about this, but ties into the top 5 in the plans to really help elevate, you know, our university on more of a national scale. And so I've been a part of, you know, different task force and pieces there as well. I think I do a lot of work with the foundation too, and the fundraising side of things, which is probably more on the line in my job description. But I think the way in which we engage supporters and donors and tell the story of this program is pretty nuanced as well. So I guess those are some things that kind of quickly come to mind. I also, you know, supervise a team now. That's not what I did the first several years. I was a one-person show running the program, and now we have a larger team. And so I think building out, you know, as the program grows and gains more national notoriety and attention, there's things that come with that can't keep me on the ground, you know, troubleshooting student issues all day, every day. I need a team to help do some of that. We're still a small team, but having some additional support internally has been really valuable.
Excellent.
Leslie, I do have a question. Okay. When students are coming into the program, maybe, I'm not sure if you know the data, but do you know how many of those students come for STEMs, with STEM degrees that they want to do, or do they come from all types, a variety of types of degrees?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have scholars in all 16 undergraduate colleges at UF in a variety of different majors. Like all students, you know, we find our students start out with degree intentions, and many finish in the degrees they decided they wanted to do as a freshman, but others might change courses based on a class or, you know, something else they got exposed to. So they might change their degree. So as far as STEM and non-STEM, I mean, I think we mirror kind of the university. If I had to guess, I don't know the data off the top of my head. We do know with the first generation student population, though, a lot of, this isn't just at UF, but first generation students are very vocationally minded, and many have pressures from family and whoever, communities, each other, to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer, or, you know, a career path that their family might have some exposure to or might know what it is. Rarely do we see, you know, a first-gen student come in and say, I want to be a public health professional, or I want to, you know, major in family, youth, and community sciences and go and work for, I don't know, be a social worker. Like we do see some of that, but we don't see that by and large. We see a lot of students who want to come in and do the professional school route. And so STEM is a part of that through engineering, through, you know, accounting and others.
You did mention earlier that the MFOS had, I guess when you guys started the program, the University of Carolina at Chapel Hill, you guys kind of got some of their ideas and implemented them into the program. Did you guys get any ideas by any chance from other programs such as like McNair, McKnight's, other programs that have been running already throughout the US, or why specifically did you guys get it from Chapel Hill?
So McNair and McKnight are more graduate student focused, is my understanding, and kind of transition out of college versus transition in. There's definitely some pieces with the federal TRIO programs, I think, that you're mentioning that I think helped guide some of the support elements of the program. The real model, though, with Chapel Hill, and maybe I wasn't as clear earlier, it was more on the financial aid side of things and how we were going to fund the program. If I remember correctly, and I don't know if they still do, but at the time, anyways, Chapel Hill required students to be to also have federal work study as part of their financial aid package, whereas the University of Florida decided that our federal work study allocation we wanted to give to other students that were not MFOS students. And so Machen scholars, and this was one of Bernie's things too, is he didn't want to require that they worked, that he really wanted them to be a full participant in the university environment and experience. And so he wanted students to be able to volunteer, do undergraduate research, or be a Cicerone or be in the band and do all this other stuff that previously work may have taken them away from some of that university experience. And so the model with UNC Chapel Hill was more on the financial aid nuances. And again, that was that was Karen Folks in the financial aid office who was really working closely with them to model the financial side of things off of them. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yes, TRIO and Upward Bound was here at the time when the program started. And so, I mean, I think we linked in to find out a little more about like what they were doing. But the specific MFOS piece, the freshman to senior college experience stuff was not exactly like either McNair, McKnight or Upward Bound or Talent Search or some of the other federal TRIO programs. It frankly is just a little bit different.
Perfect. Another question I have, where do you see the program in the next 5-10 years? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm confident that our goals are really to continue to build the endowment for this program so that it's something that over time is going to still live at the University of Florida. And so the financial support to continue to raise money for the scholarship, it's about a $10 to $10.5 million program annually that funds this program. And that's a mix of state dollars, university dollars, and then private dollars. And that is all scholarship. So, my budget and our team and our salary, that's different from that pot of money. And so the hope and the goal would be that over the next, it's probably going to take longer than 5 or 10 years, but over the next several years that we continue to grow that endowment so that the program can live at UF in perpetuity. So that's definitely one of the goals. I think the other goal here too is to continue on the front end of really building some additional K-12 and pipeline work in order for, middle schoolers, high school students to really further understand that this program is here and that it's attainable. And if they work hard in middle and high school and want to come to the University of Florida and successfully apply and get in, that we're here to fund and support them. And so, there's always turnover everywhere, but at the K-12 level in particular. And so we've got great high school guidance counselor partners across the state, but then we also have, folks that say, wait, what is this program? I don't know anything about it. And so we need to continue, I think, to storytell at the pre-collegiate level so that more and more students know that UF is possible, presuming they get admitted.
One final question from my side. Do you guys interact with the College of Education to come up with new strategies on how to better and improve the program? Or how did you guys go about improving the program through literature reviews that you guys read, the committee members, or what's the process like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in our field in higher education and student affairs, my team is trained in that as far as their educational backgrounds. We do a lot of, reading of the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed and, staying on top of the latest trends. We're contributing to those trends. Frankly, I write blogs. I've got a chapter coming out here pretty soon about first generation student support. And so I mentioned that national organization that I help kind of lead at the Center for First Gen Student Success. They're really kind of the leading voice in this work across our profession. And so we're plugged in there. We also listen to the students and we, try to also be as attuned as possible to the social issues going on in our world and what our students are experiencing and feeling and needing. And obviously, COVID is a unique time for everybody. So we've definitely had to pivot, word of 2020. And change and really, I think, grow and expand our effort in a different way. And so I think, fortunate to work alongside professionals who believe in what we're doing and have a good skill to track and assess what we're doing, but then also are like, okay, this isn't working anymore. We need to switch gears and try something else. And so we work with the College of Education a little bit more so though on the evaluation of the program in some ways. I've got a couple of partnerships over the years with some key faculty members who have helped in publishing about the success of the program. And we've got a couple other little projects brewing, I'd say right now, that might help us get some additional publications and some more national notoriety for the program. So that's more so how we work with them, less on the building of support programmatic side. I think our expertise is a little more in that space versus the evaluative, statistically significant findings, like the quantitative measures of our work is where I try to partner with some good faculty to help us do that. Good question though.
I guess I'm up. Dr. Pendleton, thank you so much for answering our questions. How has the program, so the past 4 years has been an awakening across the country, right? With racial justice, gender bias, a series of across the board changes in a sense where people have had an awakening. How do you feel the program has met that awakening and that challenge? And where do you think there are areas where the program could do better in those areas?
Sorry, both of my phones are ringing. So I think this kind of gets at what I was starting to share, I think, too, with Aldolfo. I think a lot of what we've done is listen, but more than just listen to our students and be attuned to what's out there. We've tried to, take action in the spheres of influence that we can influence. Our team has a lot of, I mentioned sort of the hard closed door conversations with that original group of the committee. I think our team takes that very seriously to raise, important conversations for us to discuss as a team, but then to also to discuss barriers and what can we influence at the university. We are really good at, is this just one person's challenge, or is this a challenge that more people are facing? Oh my God, sorry. Everybody's calling me at once. So I feel like I'm definitely not answering your question well because I'm distracted by my cell phone and my other phone. But point being, what I want you to hear is, I think having support of leaders at the university who will listen and will take some action as is within their scope, and being comfortable, I think, using connections and relationships that we have has been really, I hope, pretty key. But more than anything, I think it's being aware, being visible, being supportive in spaces that that we can influence. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah. Have there been any conversations about special approaches to LGBTQ? Because it's so funny. I think we talk about this in kind of like a political way. Oh, the first, LGBTQ to be elected, right? But we don't really talk about this as a first generation in a university context. Have those conversations occurred?
We partner quite a bit with our multicultural and diversity affairs colleagues at UF, of which LGBTQ affairs is a part of that. First generation is not, one identity, right? We do recognize the complexities and the intersections with first generation and, race and LGBT and class and everything else. And so, I think those conversations definitely happen. I think we do a lot of referrals back and forth with our colleagues who work in some of the multicultural and diversity affairs areas that you mentioned. We also, our current, just as a side, our current director of LGBT affairs, Tiffany Richards, they're an MFOS alum. And so Tiffany she co-taught first year Florida with me during her undergraduate years. And so anyways, we have good relationships on campus with students. And I believe that students view us as approachable, as welcoming, as helpful to, again, connect them to the right resources. But the program, I think we do, continually educate ourselves and participate in conversations and again, are visible advocates and supporters.
Thank you. There's almost, and I think Dr. Ortiz discussed this a bit, was talking about, it's almost like the legacy of Darwinism in the university setting, right? Survival of this fittest. That didn't mean necessarily the fittest intellectually or scholastically, but it meant financially also, right? How we've seen in news reports that at Ivy League schools that, what had been success and kind of making a more level playing field has increasingly been going in the opposite direction, right? Where there's less inclusion and underrepresented students or those first generation students are participating less. where do you see the University of Florida in that kind of situation? Do you see that kind of Darwinism, to call it something, creeping back in, or do you see what do you see?
I mean, I think what I can comment on, right, is the Machen for Opportunity Scholars Program, because that's where that's kind of the piece at which I guess see or operate the most. And so, the beauty of the program here is that it does remove the financial, needs to be a student. So we fully fund everything: tuition, room, board, books. Theoretically, from now students have complex lives outside of, their university commitments, but theoretically, this program should remove the financial barriers for students to be full participants in the university environment. So I don't see, from the students I work with, I don't see fewer of them participating in certain things on campus. Right now it's unique time because of, we're all virtual, of course, but that's not what I see happening. We, do have some pretty sophisticated tracking systems in terms of not like a chip, not a microchip, but like we reach out to students if they're not participating in different things that they're required to do as part of the program. If their GPA falls below a certain threshold, then we reach out to them, not in a you're penalized kind of way, but in a like, what's going on? There must be something going on in your life that's preventing you from, going to class or being as successful as we know you can be. So let's have kind of a case management kind of conversation and how to kind of, bring you back in and what do you need to be successful here. I mean, so the outreach and the support of the students that this program serves, that's not what I'm seeing. Does that mean it's not happening? No, but it's not kind of by and large the trends that we're seeing with the scholars associated with our program. It could be happening on a different, level, like you're commenting on, but that's not something I feel like I am as aware about enough to comment.
Okay. One final question, and thank you. What kind of services do you offer students who aren't scholars? Mm-hmm. There must be those that, were for X reasons were not invited to participate but are in need of these services. How do you help those that aren't fellows?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are other resources on campus too that we partner a lot with, but that said, we do take referrals quite a bit from our colleagues who know the work that we do. And so we do support first generation students who are not Machen scholars from we invite them to attend some of our success workshops that we offer. We participate in the student success coaching initiative at UF. So we have kind of a few students each semester that we're also coaching to be successful at UF that are not part of the MFOS program. So I think that's where where we fall. But if I'm real honest too, I mean, there's 2.5 of us full-time professionals who work in the program. And before I said, it's so great to have a staff. And so I don't want that to be misleading in the fact that we have all this extra time on our hands, because we're serving 1,250 students at any given time with 2.5 full-time staff members. And then we've got about 3,500 alumni of the program now as well. And at 2.5, because half of my time is spent with fundraising in the advancement world. So I have a 50-50 split right now of my job. And so it's quite a heavy lift to kind of provide the outreach and support to the current Machen scholars. But like any good professional, we're not going to turn anybody away who needs our support. It's just that we can't provide quite the robust outreach and support for everybody on the regular. We can do kind of some one-off opportunities and programs and whatnot, but it is reliant upon, I think, a lot of great staff and professionals in other departments at UF, like the Office of Academic Support, like some of the federally funded TRIO programs we were talking about earlier, our colleagues in enrollment management, sometimes depending on what the issue is. The ombuds. I mean, there's a lot of other people, the Career Center, of course. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But like I said, we're going to support whoever needs something, but it's a little hard to expect a whole lot of effort beyond the number of students that we're currently serving.
Thank you, Dr. Pendleton.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions. Anything else?
Well, we could keep this conversation going for many hours, but I know you have a schedule coming back online at 3:15. So why don't we go ahead, Leslie, if it's okay with you, and kind of wrap up here.